Okay, so picture this. It's like 3 in the morning, right? Your
Oh.
phone's ringing. It's the police. And it turns out someone you love has been arrested.
I can't even imagine.
It's a total nightmare,
Eh.
right? Suddenly you're dealing with all this legal stuff you don't understand, and the anxiety is just overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure, it's a lot to handle.
So that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, you'll be more prepared to deal with it.
Yeah, knowledge is power, right? The more you know, the better you can handle those kinds of stressful situations.
Absolutely. And for today's deep dive, we're going to be using this bail bonds resource guide to help us explore the whole bail bonds process.
It's a great resource. It really breaks down all the important details and gives you a step-by-step guide.
All right, so let's start with the basics. The
Yeah.
guide starts by talking about bail, but I feel like most people probably don't really understand what that means.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, but people might not have a clear understanding of what it actually is.
It's not like they explain it in movies or anything, right?
Right. It's usually just like, you're free to go on bail, and that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So can you break it down for us in simple terms? What is bail and why is it part of the legal system?
Sure. So basically, bail is a financial agreement that's meant to ensure that someone who's been arrested will come back to court for their trial.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like a guarantee that they won't just disappear.
Exactly. It helps to lower the risk of someone fleeing and also recognizes that the accused is still presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Right, so it's not about punishment at this point. It's about making sure they show up for their court date.
Yes, precisely.
Now, the next question that comes to mind is how do they actually determine the amount of bail? It can't just be a random number, right?
Oh, definitely not. There are a lot of factors that go into setting the bail amount.
Like what?
Well, they consider things like the seriousness of the crime, how likely the person is to skip town, their criminal history ties to the community, even their employment status.
So there's actually a method to the madness?
Exactly. The goal is to set an amount that's high enough to make sure they come back to court, but not so high that it's impossible for them to pay.
That makes sense. The guide also mentions something called bail schedules. What are those?
Oh, yeah. Bail schedules are basically preset amounts for common offenses.
So it's like a standardized system for less serious crimes.
Exactly. It helps to speed things up, especially in really busy courts.
Interesting. So it's all about efficiency. Then, okay, so the guide goes on to talk about different types of bail. Are there multiple ways to handle this?
Yep, there are actually four main types of bail.
Okay, what's here?
So the first one is cash bail, which is the most straightforward option. You just pay the full bail amount directly to the court.
Makes sense, but I imagine that's not always feasible for people.
Yeah, for a lot of folks, coming up with that much cash on the spot is just not possible.
So what other options are there?
Well, that's where a bail bond agent comes in.
Like Tye the 247 bondsman we talked about earlier.
Exactly. With a surety bond, you work with an agent like Tye, who essentially acts as a guarantor. They put up the full bail amount to the court for a fee.
So it's like they're vouching for the defendant.
Yeah, they're saying, hey, we trust this person will show up for their court date, and if they don't, we'll cover the cost.
And that fee is usually a percentage of the total bail amount, right?
That's right. Usually it's around 10 to 15%.
Okay, that makes sense. So having someone like Tye available 24/7 can be a lifesaver in those high-stress situations.
Absolutely. Knowing you have someone you can call anytime, day or night, can make a huge difference.
And speaking of resources, Tye's app is a great tool to have in those moments.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It gives you all the information you need right at your fingertips.
So if you're listening and want to be prepared, I highly recommend checking out calltyronebailbondsman.com and downloading his app.
It's like having a safety net in your pocket.
Now, let's say you're in that situation. The arrest has happened. Bail has been set. What are the most important steps to take according to the guide?
Well, the first thing is to stay calm and gather as much information as you can.
Like what kind of information are we talking about?
You'll need the full name of the person who was arrested, the location of the jail, the specific charges they're facing, and of course, the bail amount.
Okay, so it's all about getting the facts straight.
Exactly. Once you have all that information, the next step is to contact a bail bond agent.
And finding a reliable and trustworthy agent is crucial, right?
Absolutely. This is where someone like Tye really shines. He's incredibly experienced, knows the local system inside and out, and is available 24/7.
So having someone like him in your corner during a time like this can be invaluable.
Yeah, he can guide you through the process, answer all your questions, and help you understand your options.
So once you connect with a bail bonds agent, they'll walk you through the details of the surety bond, including the fees and any collateral that's required.
Right. And this is where transparency is really important. Tye prides himself on being upfront about all the costs and requirements involved.
So it's all about having a plan and knowing who to call when those unexpected situations pop up.
Exactly. A little bit of preparation can go a long way in reducing the stress and chaos of a situation like this.
Now, what happens after you've secured the bond? Does the person just walk free, or are there other steps involved?
Well, it's not quite that simple. There are usually a few more things that need to happen before they can be released.
So it's not like they just walk out of jail right away.
No, not exactly.
So what happens then? What's the process like after the bond is posted?
Well, usually there's some processing time at the jail.
So there's still some waiting involved?
Yeah, it usually takes a few hours for everything to get sorted out and for the person to be officially released.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there are some conditions attached to their release, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's not just a free pass. They can't just go back to their normal life as if nothing happened.
Right. So what kind of restrictions are we talking about?
Well, it varies from case to case, but generally they'll have to check in with their bondsman regularly, might have travel restrictions, and of course, absolutely have to show up for all their scheduled court dates.
Okay, that makes sense. So speaking of court dates, the guide really emphasizes how important it is not to miss those. What happens if someone skips their court appearance?
That's a big no-no. Skipping court can have some pretty serious consequences.
Like what?
Well, for starters, the bond is forfeited, which means the person who co-signed or put up collateral could be on the hook for the full bail amount.
Oh, wow. So there's a big financial risk involved?
Yeah, and on top of that, a warrant will be issued for the defendant's arrest, which just makes their situation even worse.
So, yeah, definitely not something you want to mess around with.
Not at all. It's a legally binding agreement, and the courts don't take it lightly.
That's where having a responsible bondsman like Tye comes in, right?
Absolutely. Someone who's going to keep the defendant accountable and make sure they stay on track with their court dates.
So they're not just throwing money at the problem. They're actually invested in helping the defendant stay out of trouble.
Exactly. A good bondsman is more like a guide and an advocate throughout the whole process.
Now let's talk about the fee associated with the surety bond. Some people might think it's just a one-time payment and that's it. But the guide explains that it's not quite that simple.
Right. It's not just about the money the bondsman puts up. That fee actually covers a lot more than that.
Like what?
Well, it covers their expertise, the risk they're taking, the time and effort they put into making sure the defendant follows the court's orders.
So it's more of a comprehensive service fee.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that that fee is typically non-refundable.
Oh, so regardless of the outcome of the case, the bondsman still gets paid.
That's right. It's compensation for their services and the risk they've assumed.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, the guide also mentions the possibility of a bail reduction. What if the initial bail amount seems unreasonably high? Is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah, definitely a lawyer can request a bail reduction hearing and present arguments for why the amount should be lowered.
So there's still some room for negotiation.
Exactly. They can take into account the defendant's financial situation, their ties to the community, and other relevant factors.
That's good to know. So we've talked about finding a good bondsman, understanding the fees, and even the possibility of getting the bail amount reduced. But what about some common mistakes people make when dealing with this whole process?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely some pitfalls to watch out for.
Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make?
Well, one of the most common ones is waiting too long to take action.
So procrastination can really backfire in this situation.
Big time people might hesitate, hoping things will work themselves out, or maybe they're just overwhelmed, but delaying things usually just means more time spent in jail.
So being proactive is key.
Absolutely. The sooner you start taking steps to address the situation, the better.
What other mistakes should people try to avoid?
Another big one is just going with the first bondsman they find without doing any research.
So it's important to shop around and compare different options.
Exactly. You want to make sure you're working with someone who's reputable, experienced, and trustworthy. This is where resources like Tye's website, called TyroneBailBondsman.com, can be really helpful.
It's all about being informed and making an educated decision.
Right. And a third common mistake is not asking enough questions. People might feel hesitant or embarrassed to clarify things about fees, payment plans, the conditions of release, but it's so important to communicate openly with your bondsman.
Don't be afraid to speak up and get all your concerns addressed.
Exactly. And last but not least, never ever ignore court dates or any other obligations set by the court.
Yeah, we talked about the consequences of that earlier. Definitely not worth the risk.
Not at all. It's crucial to take those obligations seriously and make sure the defendant is fully aware of them.
So basically, it's all about being prepared, informed, and proactive.
Exactly. A little bit of knowledge and planning can go a long way in navigating this whole process successfully.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm sure there's even more to dive into. What else should people keep in mind when dealing with the bail bond process? Okay, so we've talked about not waiting and finding a good bondsman, but what are some practical things people can do to be prepared just in case they ever have to deal with this?
That's a great question. It's like a fire drill, You hope you never need it, but if you do, being prepared can really make a difference.
So it's all about minimizing the panic and being ready to act.
Exactly. So one of the best things you can do is keep a list of emergency contacts handy and make sure that includes a trusted bail bond agent like Tye.
So having Ty's number saved in your phone, or even better, having his app downloaded beforehand, could be super helpful.
Oh, absolutely. In those crucial first moments, you don't want to be scrambling trying to find the right person to call.
Right. You want to be able to act quickly and decisively.
And another thing you can do to prepare is just familiarize yourself with the basics of bail bonds. Ty's website, called TyroneBailBondsman.com, is a great resource for that.
So taking a little time to understand the process beforehand can really save you a lot of stress and confusion down the line.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand about the system, the better equipped you'll be to handle it.
And when you do connect with a bail bonds agent, what kind of information should you have ready to go?
Well, the more information you have, the better. But some of the key things include the full name and date of birth of the person who was arrested, their booking number, if you have it, the location of the jail, and the specific charges they're facing.
Okay, so it's kind of like packing a go bag for a potential crisis, having those essentials ready to go.
Exactly. Having that information organized and easily accessible can make the whole process much smoother.
Now, besides the practical stuff, there's also the emotional side of things, right? This is a high-stress situation, and people are going to be feeling a lot of anxiety.
Absolutely. And that's something that often gets overlooked. It's not just about the logistics, it's also about having the emotional resources to navigate a difficult experience.
So how can people prepare for that aspect of it?
Well, having a support system in place, knowing who you can call for help, and just understanding the process can go a long way in managing the anxiety.
So it's about feeling empowered and not letting the fear take over.
Exactly. And remember, even though we've covered a lot of ground today, this deep dive is really just a starting point.
Right. Every situation is unique, and there's always more to learn.
Exactly. So if you want to be truly prepared, the best advice I can give is to do your research consult with professionals like attorneys or trusted bail bond agents like Tye. Having those experts on your side can make all the difference.
So it's about being proactive and not being afraid to ask for help.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. There are resources available and people who can support you through it.
So as we wrap things up, I think the key takeaway here is that while the bail bonds process can seem intimidating, knowledge is power. Understanding the system, preparing in advance, and connecting with the right resources can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And having a resource like Tye and his website, called TyroneBailBondsman.com, can give you peace of mind knowing you have someone you can turn to in those difficult moments.
So folks, do yourselves a favor, download Ty's app today and have that lifeline right in your pocket if you ever find yourself facing this unexpected hurdle. Stay informed, stay prepared, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.